Yo, what is up, guys? It's your boy Bernie here along with Sean.
Let's go, guys. NFC West.
Yes, and of course, Sean, we got to talk about the NFC West. But before we talk about the NFC West, guys, please remember to hit that like and subscribe button if you love this NFL content. Like I talked about here, we have the NFC East, the NFC North, the NFC South, every division you can think of, including the NFC West, which we're going to be talking about today. But remember, guys, hit that like button. Also, remember to hit that subscribe button if you are new to the channel. But anyway, guys, let's talk about it. We don't even have to make this video. This video can be 2 seconds long. It's going to be the Seattle Seahawks 16-0, the other teams 0-16. We can end the video right here.
Yep. Thanks for joining.
But nevertheless, let's really talk about this division. The NFC West, another tough division, probably one of the toughest besides the NFC South, which we talked about earlier. Go and check that out. A little self-plug in there. But the NFC West, Sean, this is, like I said, one of the toughest divisions because every team could potentially be vying for that number one spot in the West.
Yeah, I mean, this one's really up in the air. Every team's competitive. You know, the Rams are just a couple of years removed from a Super Bowl. 49ers were in the Super Bowl the year before. Cardinals have added some major pieces, and the Seahawks are competitive every single year. They have only missed the playoffs once in the past, 10 years. So it's really all up in the air here.
Yeah, so let's talk about the number 4 team, or the team that's going to be in last place. And if I'm going to be honest, Sean, I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Rams in 4th place.
All right. I mean, it's a bold prediction. I honestly, I think I would agree. I'm really on the edge here because it's really tough. I think the Rams have a chance to just bounce back and be the team that they were just a few years ago. They did lose some big pieces, but to me, when you have a generational player like Aaron Donald on one side, and you have some really good receivers like Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, obviously they no longer they change up their running back situation. Losing Todd Gurley could be pretty big, but I'm gonna agree, and I'm gonna put the Rams in 4th place here. I think Jared Goff and his tiny baby hands just doesn't have enough to play in the NFC West. It's gonna be tough. I mean, yeah, he gets good weather in LA, but when he comes to Seattle, he's gonna take two losses. He can't play in cold weather, can't play in the rain. His hands are like 5 inches. He just really doesn't have what it takes to lead his team to a Super Bowl or win this division anymore. I think they're the bottom feeders of this division, even though they do have some really talented players. But Jared Goff is just not the answer for the Rams. He had his shot to win a Super Bowl and he choked it. I just don't see them bouncing back, even though they do have the potential. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a total agreement with you here. I mean, like I said before, I had them in 4th. I just think that it comes down to Jared Goff and Jared Goff alone. I think that we can talk about the defense being a little bit older, having some decently good players here and there. But to me, it comes down to Jared Goff and the tiny baby hands like you talked about. But even besides the joke of the baby hands, I just think that Jared Goff just doesn't have what it takes to lead a team to the over the hump. I think that they had to use a little bit of gimmicky stuff with Sean McVay, having to kind of trick teams here and there with his offensive play calling, which he's very good at. But at some point, the teams are going to hone in on that and change the way that they play Jared Goff. And we even saw in the Super Bowl, they got exposed a little bit on how Bill Belichick was able just to outmaneuver and outsmart Sean McVay and Jared Goff. I mean, it was kind of mentioned in the Super Bowl that at 16 seconds, all communications with the quarterback and all that stuff is off. And Bill Belichick understood that and said, you know what? McVay is going to talk until the 16-second mark, and then Bill Belichick's like, all right, we're going to change our defense at the 16-second mark here. And then all of a sudden, Jared Goff's like, what do I do? He couldn't throw a receiver open. He couldn't find the right receiver to get open. So I think this is going to be another year where they might have to cut their losses with Jared Goff at some point, in my opinion, and move on to another quarterback that you don't rely on gimmicks to get over the hump.
Gave him that big contract. So, I mean, they're going to have to carry probably, I'm assuming, a lot of dead money with him, even if they get rid of him. But at this point, if I was them, I'd start looking for a new quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, even the weapons that they have, Cooper Kupp before he got injured was really doing very well for them. Robert Woods is a decently good receiver. I mean, they had a chance to get a guy like Odell Beckham, and they had other chances to get some decently good receivers, but I just think that looking at their roster, there's nothing special about it on the offensive end, I think, other than Cooper Kupp. You can maybe say Tyler Higbee if you want to, but I just don't see anyone on this roster, in my opinion, that kind of screams that this team could potentially, bounce back and get back to where they were, which were Super Bowl aspirations. The reason why Tony Khan built, Tony Khan. God, who's the owner of the team? The owner of Arsenal.
Tony Khan's the owner of the Jaguars.
The Jaguars. It's who is the guy? He owns the Nuggets too. It's gonna upset me. It's gonna upset me. Why don't you talk while I figure out?
Basketball fan.
Yeah, talk about it while the owner goes. While I find the owner.
All right. Well, I'll talk about who I'm going to have in third place, and this is a really tough call because, I mean, you have new additions to the Cardinals like DeAndre Hopkins, who could just be a complete game changer with Kyler Murray going into his second year. And so for me, for third place, I'm going to put the San Francisco 49ers.
Wow.
Yep.
49ers.
I think they're going into a Super Bowl slump here. Richard Sherman's an old, slow cornerback. He's just going to get roasted over and over. Dude's going to find his way to the bench. Sorry, Sherman, but that's just how it is. And the 49ers, they lost Emmanuel Sanders, and now what do they have? They have Deebo Samuel, and they drafted Brandon Ayuk from, I think, Arizona State. It's really not an impressive offense. You have George Kittle, who's probably one of the best tight ends, but I think people will figure out how to cover him. He's really not built like a tight end, to be honest. He's built more like a wide receiver, and so I think if people start covering him differently, it'll work out a lot better. I don't think Raheem Mostert's that good, or Tevin Coleman. And for me, the biggest thing is I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a huge fraud. I don't think he's good enough. Yeah, I think this past season their defense definitely carried them, but I think they're old. They lost a lot of key players. They did, and so I think looking at it, their defensive line has gotten worse. Their secondary is worse. Their linebackers are just going to be a year older. And I don't see Jimmy Garoppolo being the quarterback to lead them. I think he's probably, in my opinion, Jimmy Garoppolo may be the worst quarterback in the NFC West.
Wow.
I think even baby hands Goff might be better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And so I'm going to have them in third place. I think they're going to take a big step back. I mean, there may be a chance they could make the wild card, and there could be 3 teams from the NFC West that make it, but I just don't see them carrying it. I think they're past their day, and I think Garoppolo is going to get exposed.
Okay. But before I talk about that, Stan Kroenke is actually the owner of the Rams, and kind of the point I was going to make there before I move on to mine is that Stan Kroenke didn't pay all this money for this $1 billion stadium for the Rams just to be average. So that's what I'll say about that. But I think I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I think that the Cardinals right now, I love Kyler Murray. I think he's going to be a good quarterback in this league. I love adding of DeAndre Hopkins and Larry Fitzgerald, who doesn't seem to age a bit. He looks the same ever since he came into the league to where he's at right now. They've added some pretty good players. I like Isaiah Simmons. They even got my guy Fotulecki, a very good defensive tackle from the University of Utah. I know I'm praising my Utes out here, but I just think that they have a lot of good weapons and a lot of good players around them, that the Cardinals could be a team that could sneak in there for a wild card spot, whether they're at 10-6 or 9-7. I just think that defensively, they're still maybe a little bit of ways. I know they have Patrick Peterson, probably one of the best corners out there. They have Chandler Jones. They have a lot of good players, but the Budda Baker, another one. I think that, and they have a lot, like I said, a lot of great players. But what I'm noticing here is that their defense, although it's good and although it's ready, it's still a very young defense. I think that I give them a couple more years, especially in some key positions. It's very young. So if you give them a couple more years, I think that they'll eventually take over the 49ers and the Rams and be that solidifying second place, back in the days when it was Kurt Warner taking those Arizona Cardinals teams to the Super Bowl against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they're going to get back to those days eventually, but I think it's going to take at least 2 to 3 more years for them to do it.
Yeah, I mean, see, for me, I think the Cardinals have the best wide receiver trio in the NFL. And if you look at just their top 2 receivers with Fitz and Hopkins, the only wide receiver duo that competes with that is probably the Saints with Emmanuel Sanders and Michael Thomas.
You're and really on that Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. You're on the you're on the jockstrap today. What's going on?
I mean, I think that these receivers are going to make a big difference here. I mean, Hopkins and Fitzgerald just, consistently racking up yards and catches every year. It doesn't matter how old he is. Hopkins is, potentially the best receiver in the NFL at this point. Kyler Murray's a baller, and I think that he's going to have a really big breakout year. I think he's going to take a step kind of like Russell Wilson did in his sophomore year. For me, I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to end up here in second place, and I think they've improved their offensive line. I think they're really dedicated to Kyler Murray, and they added Kenyon Drake at running back and replaced an injury-prone David Johnson. I think that's a really good decision. Kenyon Drake has been pretty good. Chase Edmonds showed some flashes too at running back. So for me, I think Kyler Murray is going to really step up this year. Carry this team, and with receivers like Hopkins and Fitzgerald, and also Christian Kirk, who's really good. I see them turning it around. Their defense, is already pretty solid. Patrick Peterson's old, but he's old in a different. I mean, he's old like Richard Sherman, but Patrick Peterson's always been fast. Richard Sherman, on the other hand, has always needed over-the-top coverage. Been a really good ball hawk, but not someone who's going to be able to keep up with someone going deep. Right. And so for me, that's a big difference in when you get old. I think Peterson's keeping his athleticism longer than Sherman.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I like about the 49ers a little bit more than the Arizona Cardinals is their defense. I think that having Solomon Thomas, having Armstead there, even their, Nick Bosa, who, whether you like his political opinions or not, that's for people to decide. That's not for me to decide. But they have some really good, decently good players. Obviously, their cornerback position is definitely their biggest weakness because Sherman's a little bit older, and that's how they got beat in the Super Bowl. Their corners just couldn't cover the receivers of the Chiefs. But I think that these guys aren't going to, I'm not saying that the 49ers are going to be looking for revenge. They're going to be back in the Super Bowl. I think they're going to take a step back, like normal Super Bowl teams that kind of have that Super Bowl hangover that lose have usually. But what I'm noticing, and maybe this is a trend that I'm noticing, is that these quarterbacks that they get, whether it is Jared Goff, whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo, or those, the receivers or the quarterbacks like Mitchell Trubisky, the ones that rely on the play action, I feel like they have to win a Super Bowl in the first 2 years. Otherwise, their team looks old, and then they just the roster kind of depletes or deflates. And I'm wondering if maybe that's a video we can talk about another day, where it feels like there's a trend where there's a lot of these teams taking these quarterbacks that really are just they're decent, but they're not good enough to get you out of situations, but they're not bad enough to lose you situations. And so I'm wondering if that's, game managers basically. And I'm wondering if that's kind of the route of what these teams are taking, which I don't necessarily agree with at all. I feel like you need quarterbacks making some big plays. You can have all the defense in the world, but if you're down and you need someone to make a play, Jimmy Garoppolo is definitely not one of those quarterbacks that can make a play. He's another quarterback that relies on the play action pass, relies on quick reads, relies on things that he needs to get him. He relies on Kyle Shanahan to get him situations, to get those different coverages. I know Kyle Shanahan is a great offensive mind, but I think that Jimmy Garoppolo this next season is probably going to be exposed a little bit in terms of, I don't think he's going to be able to make the throws that he once did, because defenses and coordinators are now like, okay, these are the tendencies of Jimmy Garoppolo. We're going to take advantage of it and pick him off every time. Yeah,
I mean, I can see that, but for me, Cardinals are second, 49ers third, which will shock a lot of people here.
Yeah, it shocked me. I got shocked. But what's not shocking is going to be the number one team. And of course, you know, this might be biased. This might be a lot of people might call us bandwagoners, even though we live here. Is of course the Seattle Seahawks, number one. We feel like they're going to be finally getting back to their Super Bowl ways this coming year. But Sean, why don't you talk first about it, since I just finished talking? What makes the Seahawks the number one team for you?
Yeah, so I mean, you have to start with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, debatably the best quarterback in the league. It's him or Patrick Mahomes, and I don't think there's many people who debate that. Even with Lamar Jackson being MVP, I don't think many people would debate that Lamar Jackson is better than Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes. Russell Wilson is going to have DK Metcalf going into year 2. DK Metcalf as a rookie had 900 yards, like 8 touchdowns. The dude's a monster, and he's been putting in the work in the offseason, getting his feet faster, improving his hands. He had some big drops last year. He had a couple too many fumbles because he was trying to do too much, but you know, that was just him as a rookie. And so you add that to the connection with Tyler Lockett, and what looks like is they're going to be adding, most likely from what I've heard, is that they're going to add Josh Gordon back onto the roster. Ooh. And so if you give Josh Gordon, and doesn't have to face any suspension or anything for marijuana, if you give him a full offseason to train with Russ, a full preseason to train with Russ, learn the routes, he has the potential to, you know, have that superstar ability to break big plays. The last play we saw with him with the Seahawks was making that crazy diving catch against the Panthers. Mm-hmm. That was insane. And so when you look into that and you look at us having we added Greg Olsen on the offense. We've rebuilt our offensive line, and so finally maybe Russ will have some protection. I mean, it's still a question mark, but if Russ gets time, we added Greg Olsen, a healthy Will Dissly. Will Dissly had 6 touchdowns in about 2 or 3 games last year before he got hurt on a non-contact injury. If Dissly is healthy, he'll be the starting tight end, and Greg Olsen will be more of a blocker. But then you put in someone like, you know, Jacob Hollister, who can also, you know, fill in at tight end as a good pass catcher, a quick, smaller guy who can also play fullback. That's going to be a really dangerous combo. Will Dissly's a big guy, and I expect a breakout year for him if he's healthy. Russ really likes him as a target, and he does everything well. You look at the running back situation. Chris Carson broke his leg. Rashad Penny tore his ACL. There's some question marks, and they're coming back, but Chris Carson's been consistently good, and we added Carlos Hyde, who's coming off a good career year, like with 1,100 yards. Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde next to each other, I don't expect much from Penny, but those two playing off each other, I think could be a really dangerous combo for the Seahawks on the offense. And when you look at the defense, we're not going to get clowny. I mean, we offered him $15 million for 1 year. He said no. He wants $20 million. Personally, I'm not going to pay $20 million for a run-stuffing defensive end. I think, and a lot of people will disagree with this, I think we improved our defensive line. Adding Bruce Irvin, adding Benson Mayowa, right there, that's about plus 14 sacks if you replace Clowney. Irvin had like 8.5, and I think Benson Mayowa had 7.5. And you can stack that on top of drafting Jordan Brooks, a really fast line-penetrating linebacker who just runs downhill. Like, he's super fast. You add that into our second-round pick with Darrell Taylor and then Alton Robinson, who are both 2 really fast defensive ends. They remind me of Michael Bennett without the offsides issues. Almost like a Cliff Averill kind of thing. And so I think, honestly, when you compare the pieces that we've added versus the pieces that we lost, we re-signed Jaron Reed. Maybe LJ Collier can have a breakout year. I think he's kind of fat and slow. I think he's going to end up being at the back of the rotation. Kind of a waste of a first-round pick, but I think we made up for it with Darrell Taylor and Alton Robinson. And, you know, the biggest piece for me on the defense, actually, is going to be replacing Trey Flowers with, fingers crossed, Quinton Dunbar getting off for those fake news robbery charges. You know, his attorney is pretty sure he's going to get off, and you know, everyone who accused him in that case signed sworn affidavits saying he wasn't involved. So I assume Quinton Dunbar is going to be there, and then we'll have Shaquille Griffin on one side, Dunbar on the other, with Quandre Diggs now having a full season in the Seahawks defense. I think that's a really dangerous combo, and I think the Seahawks are prepped for a first place finish here.
Yeah, I think to play devil's advocate, though, I think the defense is still a little bit of a question mark. I wasn't completely sold on Jordan Brooks as a linebacker that they drafted. I thought there was some other great players. The guy from LSU was there on the board that I thought that they should have taken instead.
McQueen.
Yeah, Lightning McQueen. Lightning McQueen should have been taken there in the first round. But like you, I think that Bobby Wagner, Shaquille Griffin, KJ Wright, some great players there in their own right that can help the defense. I think ultimately, it's going to come down to the offense bailing out the defense at this point. We know that years ago it used to be the other way around. Now it's got to be this way. And I think for me, what I have to see more of is more passing from the offense. I think Brian Schottenheimer has to incorporate Russell Wilson, whether it's on even him in the running game. I feel like Russell Wilson hasn't been involved. I know that he's older now. He's almost in his 30s. But I think that he's still good enough to get down and not take the big hits, to just use him in the running game. Because I feel like there's times where I felt like Russell Wilson should have had more opportunities, and maybe he should have done a little bit more to run the ball, and he could have gotten some easier first downs, easier yardage situations. And Brian Schottenheimer has to put the ball in Russell Wilson's hands from here on out. I don't care about Chris Carson or Carlos Hyde in terms of giving them touches because they want to go for a play action type of offense. It just doesn't work for us, because Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde aren't home run hitters in their own right. I mean, Chris Carson has a little bit of it, but I just think that Russell Wilson has to be the main focal point of this offense, and he has
let Russ cook.
Let him cook. Let him be in the offense. Let him be like a Drew Brees, where you had Alvin Kamara later down the line, but earlier Drew Brees was throwing the ball more. He was actually doing something with it each and every time, and so putting that ball in his hands to me is going to be a better all-around offense and kind of an overall team camaraderie if he has the ball in his hands making the big plays.
Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks have the best quarterback in the NFL, debatably. So let him throw the ball. There's no reason he should be throwing it 20 times a game when you see someone like Patrick Mahomes, Drew Brees throwing it 40, 50 times a game. We have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. We added Philip Dorsett. There's a really good chance we'll get back Josh Gordon, and our tight ends are pretty stacked. You got to let Russ cook. You can't just waste him in his prime. And if they do waste him this year and they continue just to run the ball, 20, 30 times a game, I hope that we get a coaching change, because I don't want to waste Russ anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in total agreement with you there. I think that a head coaching change, a coordinator change has to be done, because the fact that we're kind of doing to Russell Wilson what they've done to Aaron Rodgers to a slighter extent here is kind of just ludicrous, that we don't give him more opportunities to throw the ball, let him have the ball in his hands, because he ultimately is what makes or breaks the team. And, we all love the heart attack moments where we're down 10 and with 3 or 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and Russell Wilson has to make some plays out of what to get the team to even get back into the game and then eventually win the game. And I'm tired of doing that. I want to see us eventually at some point win a couple of games where we throw the ball and we throw them out of a game and we end up winning a game like 42-21.
Yeah. We went 10-2 in one-score games last season. We can't just keep relying on running the ball, running out the clock, and allowing Russ to be super clutch. Why don't we just throw him out of the game like we know Russ has the ability to do? Let's run up the score on him. Let's be like the Broncos were when we beat them in the Super Bowl. Let's be an offense that can't be stopped, and let's let Russ air it out. He's the most accurate thrower in the game. His deep ball's amazing, and we have potentially one of the best receivers in the NFL coming up here in DK Metcalf.
Yeah, and I think that it's like I said, this is going to be the biggest question mark for Pete Carroll and the Seahawks. Can they give the ball more into Russell Wilson's hands? Can Russell Wilson take advantage of those more opportunities given to him? But we want to know your guys' comments and opinions in the comment section down below. Do you guys agree with our analysis that the Seahawks are going to be 16-0 with the other teams going 0-16? Let us know in the comment section down below. But anyway, guys, before we get going, Sean, do you have anything to say about the NFC or the people out there that are listening?
I mean, just the NFC West here, honestly, it could go in any direction. The Rams could bounce back. The Cardinals could surprise everyone. The 49ers could sink, or they could stay the top dog in the NFC. I think they're going to sink. No matter what, if you like this content, like and subscribe. Come back, listen to more.
All right, guys, you heard Sean. You're going to be doing that right now. Anyway, guys, we'll catch you in the next video. Remember to like and subscribe.
Thanks for joining.